everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 6th of May 2026. Before moving on to tonight's agenda, I would firstly like to say how saddened I am to hear of the passing of Councillor Phil Filmer, who was the opposition spokesperson for this committee. The news came as a shock. He was a very much valued member of this committee and will be greatly missed. My condolences go out to all his family, friends, colleagues, to everybody that knew him. If we can now all stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. If you'll be seated. So the first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? Councillor Campbell?
I'm substituting for, Councillor Hamilton.
Councillor Kemp?
With a deep regret and a heavy heart, I'm here.
Thank you. Item 2, are the records of the meeting held on 8th of April 2026 agreed? Item 3 on the agenda. I can confirm that there are no late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge? Thank you. Councillor Vi?
Yeah, thank you there, Chair. Plan application MC 250965, Lower Upnor. I know the owner of Port Werburg, and that's a little further downriver, with sponsors reform. So I will be withdrawing from the meeting and take no part in the determination of the planned application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vi. Dave Harris?
Sorry, Chair, just to say that in relation to the same application for Lower Upnor, I was aware that with the previous application, a number of good friends of mine had objected to that. So seeing this application coming in and making an assumption, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, I've had no involvement in this application at all.
Thank you, Dave. Any other members? No. Before moving on to agenda item 5, Councillor Williams has asked to speak as ward member. Is that agreed by members? Agreed. Thank you. So now moving on to the first planning application, agenda item 5, land to the south of former Upnor Public Convenience. Peter Hockney will be presenting this application, so over to you, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application site relates to the area you can see outlined in red. It's within Lower Upnor, within the flood zone 3 and marine conservation zone. You can see it extends for part of the shoreline and also out into part of the river. The site's near to SSSI, but not within it. And there are a few Grade 2 listed buildings in the vicinity as well. In terms of the history of the site, recent history in any case, the The site used to house a houseboat which came out perpendicular from the shoreline, and enforcement notice was served against the stationing of that houseboat for residential purposes. The piles that had been driven into the riverbed, which you can see on this plan here, and the construction of the jetty and the steps onto the shore. Now, during the consideration of the appeal into that enforcement notice, the inspector concluded that the ramp and the jetty and the steps caused no visual harm to the character and appearance of the area. That when considering the piles, it was considered by the inspector that as they were not associated with a commercial use, and the significant number of piles in total, that they caused a small degree of visual harm in relation to the character and appearance of the area. And then the final element was obviously the mooring and stationing of the houseboat for residential purposes. It was a large boat with a two-storey addition to the hull, and the inspector considered that aspect covered by the notice caused significant harm visually. He examined the impact on the listed buildings and considered that development caused no harm to the setting of the listed buildings. So where we are now is the houseboat has been removed. So as I say, that was the aspect that was deemed to cause significant harm by the inspector. And the application tonight seeks to regularise part of the remaining development and essentially repurpose the site for a different use. So you can see here the piles which are as they are existing in terms of number and height. The proposed, this is the existing toilet block which is on the site. The proposed layout here, you can see that the piles identified in red are to be removed completely, and that's 8 of the piles, and it's sought to retain 10 of the remaining piles at a reduced height. Excuse me. The application is also for the retention of the steps and the this pontoon jetty area, which, as I say, the inspector considered to have had no visual harm in any case, so it's seeking the retention of that. And then the proposed element of the application is this projecting pontoon, again perpendicular to the existing pontoon and the shoreline, which would extend 26 metres out from the existing pontoon and would enable the mooring of boats which are for leisure purposes. So that would essentially propose a commercial use, which the inspector had identified in the previous appeal that there wasn't an associated commercial use for which the piles were deemed necessary. So, as you'll see from the report, the use is considered to be consistent with the other uses within the river and compliant with the policy. The building that's located here, which currently houses the toilets, is proposed to be used for a shower and toilet area and some storage associated with the leisure use. So the result would be that by the reduction of the number of piles, and those that are to be retained are to be reduced in height, that the level of visual harm has been reduced to a level that is not significant and would not warrant refusal. And you can see in terms of the surrounding area, this is the existing toilet building, which, as I say, will be repurposed, but there's no proposals to do any extensions or significant alterations to that building. The pillbox in here is to be unchanged and unaffected by the application. And you can see from this aerial photograph that there are other similar projections out into the river, which are used to accommodate boats on the structures. So this wouldn't be an unusual use along this part of the river, as I say, when it extends out from this location. There are conditions recommended to overcome concerns regarding disturbance to wintering birds. Excuse me. And also in relation to the time of the time of occupation that can be allowed for leisure purposes. That conditions sought to be updated with the supplementary agenda, and the SAMS bird fee has been paid to offset the disturbance from any holiday makers or leisure tourists that use the facility and cause disturbance. So in the same way that we would seek it for new holiday accommodation or indeed residential properties. So this is purely on the basis of a holiday use, but the SAMS payment is still relevant and as a result has been paid. And with those conditions, we are recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now move over to Councillor Williams as ward member, who will have 5 minutes to speak once he's ready.
Right, thanks, Chair. Thanks, members, for allowing me to speak tonight. This objection is on behalf of myself and Councillor Mrs Turping. The Parish Council's objection sums up our thoughts exactly on this matter. We were extremely disappointed that Medway Council has not taken legal proceedings to uphold the inspector's decision to dismiss the appellant's appeal. This matter has already been a subject of planning appeals process following an unauthorised installation of poles, jetty, metal posts, ramps, stairs and the mooring of a houseboat on the site in question. These works were carried out without the necessary planning permission. As a result, an enforcement notice was issued requiring the removal of the aforementioned structures and cessation of the unauthorised use. The applicant subsequently appealed this notice. However, the appeal was dismissed and the enforcement notice was upheld with modifications. The appeal details are as follows. The mill change of land for the mooring of waterborne vessel used for residential purposes. The operational development consists of piles being driven in the riverbed of the River Medway within land to enable mooring of waterborne vessels and the construction of jetty steps to create an access onto the riverbank and land. The requirements of the notice were cease the use of land for residential purposes, cease the use of land for mooring waterborne vessels, remove the large waterborne vessel from the land, remove all piles from the riverbed within the land and protruding metal posts, remove all ramps, stairs, handrails associated with the construction access to the riverbank and or mooring within the land, remove all resultant debris and materials from compliance with above steps from the land. And this, as far as we know, hasn't been carried out. It also directed that the enforcement notice is varied. Part 1, cease the use of the land for mooring of waterborne vessels, used for residential purposes, and the duration of 6 months for compliance to 12 months. To date, more than a year after the appeal decision, the houseboat has reported to be removed. However, the piles, posts, jetties, ramps, stairs, associated infrastructure remain in place in direct contravention of the enforcement notice. We are of the opinion that this respective application demonstrates a disregard for the planning process. It appears to be an attempt to legitimise development that has already been deemed unacceptable through due process. Furthermore, there are concerns that retaining these structures lays the groundwork for future applications to more additional residential vessels at this site, effectively establishing a residential marina by incremental development. Council has also raised the following additional objections. Inappropriate location. There are existing suitable residential moorings and recreational moorings such as in Cuxton and Hoo. The character and set-up that makes it unsuitable for such development. Access issues. Based on the submitted plans, there appears to be no direct access from the site land in the land in the applicant's ownership. Is indicated access routes across third-party land. It is believed that the applicant does have legal rights of access. Public objection. There are high levels of local objection, which was expressed at a public meeting in November 24, attended by 40 or 50 people, as well as dozens of written objections to this actual application. Also, there is an objection, which I'll bring your details to, from Rochester Oyster and Floating Fisheries, and I quote, Rochester Oyster and Floating Fishery hold exclusive fishing rights within the River Medway from Sheerness to Hawkswood Stone, established by statute, an Act of Parliament. As a result of the statutes, ROF would have to agree to any works on the riverbed below the low water mark. ROF do not agree and therefore also raise the objection primarily on the grounds of infringement of fishing rights. I must be confessed to be surprised to see this application at all. ROF members attended and gave evidence at the recent public inquiry linked to this illegal and unauthorised development. An exacting enforcement action is in place to remove all the piles from this development. No prior authorisation was sought from Medway Council to the Marine Management Organisation or ROF for the existing works which the application appears to want made use of. This retrospective application appears to be an attempt to circumnavigate the conditions of the enforcement notice duly served by the Planning Inspectorate. For the reasons stated above, we'd ask this Planning Committee to refuse this application and ensure full compliance with the original enforcement notice is done. Thank you very much, Chair, members.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you.
Right, now move over to members. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. This evening, this committee has heard from my fellow ward councillor, John Williams. He has informed you already that a similar retrospective planning application has been submitted for this site, and not only rejected by this committee, but also turned down by Inspector on appeal. What members may not be aware or may not recall, the original retrospective application was not for one houseboat, but for 4. That's why there are so many pylons. Most members will know that the pylons and jetty mysteriously appeared at the site and were installed illegally. And they're illegal because they actually got the person to install them. They told him that they had planning permission for it when they obviously didn't. Soon to be followed by an illegal moored houseboat. Why was it an illegal moored houseboat? Because it was evicted. I'll take that again, evicted from its original site because the applicants refused to abide by the conditions of the mooring that they had. It took a lot of hard work initiated by the parish council and local residents to get this illegal squatting houseboat removed. And remember, it was a decision by this planning committee to support that. Even after that appeal, the houseboat was not removed until the 11th hour of the time limit set by the inspectorate, and the order to remove the jetty and the pylons remove have never been complied with. So I believe it's a fair and open question to request from our own planning team and enforcement officers to ask why not, which means the conditions proposed are open to question. So let's start with condition 2. If after many months with an order to remove the pylons and jetty not enforced, who's going to monitor and enforce this? Certainly not the applicant, and based on their track record of their use of creating and using an illegal mooring. Now we have condition 3. In the same vein, how is this going to be monitored and enforced? Along with my comments in regards to the applicant's track record, additionally, where is all this grey water and possibly sewage going to be disposed of? Surely only into the river, creating more contamination along that stretch of river. Condition 4. So of course I can rock up on day 1, stay for 5 consecutive days and move down for a nice river cruise for an hour or so and then return for a further 5 days. I know the condition says that you're not supposed to do, but that condition is a mockery. Because who's going to monitor that? And there's no mention of any repercussions or fines or other methods to discourage it. So that condition 4 is just invalid. Condition 5, no more than 15 craft, not the few that you've seen on the picture, 15. I'm absolutely positive members know this site. 15 craft arriving and leaving with their engines revving to manoeuvre to dock and to leave, with potential onboard parties taking place for 5 days. I just take this opportunity to remind members that those on these boats have no access to the mainland. You've seen the picture, it's fenced off. There is no access to the mainland. This area has been fenced off. Condition 8 refers to some piles being removed and others reduced in height. I come back to the fact that all piles and the jetty were to be removed by the inspectorate. So what is this nonsense that we're talking about now? And of course, how will waste be stored and collected? We all know the answer to that, and how the condition will be treated with respect, along with requests for biodiversity. Well, there will be none because they have no access to the land. Members, you will have read all the objections submitted by various groups, the parish councils, the residents, and I urge your deliberations. Not only do they wish to remain a number of illegal pylons, but also add an additional pontoon of some 26 metres in length. Now, quite rightly, the officers pointed out to you there are other such jetties going into the river. But I also asked you if you've ever been down there, they've never been used. And the occasional time they are, it's by a single, I repeat, a single sailing boat. So you have to admit the audacity of this applicant and also the failure of this planning department and its enforcement officers. And I'm not sure the original ruling was not enforced. Members will have noted the report, there's more available moorings close to this site, all up and down the river, plenty of moorings available. And therefore you need to question the motives of this application. Surely if you approve this, it'll only be a matter of months before they come back and say, well, commercially it wasn't viable, perhaps we can stick a houseboat or 2 there. On number 35 refers to the tourists having access to the pubs and restaurants without that. But remember, I've already highlighted, they have no legal access to the mainland. It is fenced off. Unless they break down that fence, and that encompasses that area. So this is a major flaw in the officer's report. Even if they are allowed to build an additional ramp, so there'll be no benefit to the local community whatsoever. And to further highlight this issue, there is no right of way to this area by road, and therefore all building materials will have to be brought in by river. Then there is the further clarification of using the old toilet block as a WC and shower, but no details of where that grey water and sewage is going to go or how it's going to be removed. Remember, members, once again, no right of way by road. And let's highlight yet again, where is this sewage and grey water going? Along with the chemicals used to clean the toilet and the soaps in the shower. They will just be discharged into the river, causing further contamination. Paragraph 135 of the MPPF asserts a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. I'm less than positive that sewage from this site being washed up on the foreshore does not meet the criteria of high standard, unless the report is referring to a high tide when it comes in and washes it away. In reference to the lower Upland car park to be used for visiting friends and relatives. So once they've parked their vehicles, remembering once again no access to the site as it's fenced off, what will they do when they return to the car park that evening to find the gates locked? Which members are fully aware only a few weeks ago we discussed this, that car park gets locked. Finally, I return considering that members of the Planning Committee refused the retrospective planning information supported by the Inspectorate under appeal. I'm absolutely horrified, flabbergasted and appalled that this application making the situation worse is being promoted by our planning officers as acceptable for approval. Madam Chair, I will not be voting for approval on this application, and if my fellow members of the committee do likewise, I'm more than happy for you to give this document for reasons for refusal. And if it is refused, I'm absolutely sure the Vice Chairman has more than enough information in this. The document's already been produced to give reasons for refusal, and I'm more than happy for it to be referred back to officers for the reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. Councillor Golvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I must admit, reading this officer report, I was quite confused. The recommendation is for approval, but when you look at particularly conditions 6, 7 and 11, they're designed to make this virtually unviable as a mooring, particularly condition 6. I've got to be frank, a berth on which you cannot refuel or do any maintenance on your boat is about as much use as a chocolate fireguard. You know, I've spent my whole life working on ships and vessels. All vessels from the smallest mirror dinghy up to the 45,000 ton cross-channel ferries I've worked on require a huge amount of maintenance, and to be told that you cannot do any maintenance on that berth because it may cause ecological damage to the nearby area, how is that going to be enforced? You know, in my younger days, I would have just stuck 2 spanners up at the thing and gone on and done the maintenance. But so if the officers believe that the chance of any oil, yacht varnish, thinners is damaging to that environment, the best thing to do is not to give the permission in the first place, because that condition is just totally unenforceable. Who is going to be observing what is going on those boats? It is just impractical. I think the more honest thing to do with this application is actually to refuse it. The piles themselves, I think, should be removed, and we should ensure they are removed, not just cropped, because somebody in the future could moor over them and do damage to their boat. I'm also rather disturbed by the recent fencing off of the site. There are very few, and indeed most of the frontage of the River Medway, there are very few points within Medway, particularly on that north side of the river, where you've got an unobstructed view over the river. That fence, in my opinion, must go. It's a public right-of-way along there. I believe it's part of the Saxon Shoreway. You know, that fence is totally obscuring a nice view across, and it is a nice view across the St Mary's Island and able to see the river. You know, so I object very, very strongly to that fence being there, and that should go. So I don't think this is a good application. Also, my understanding is that the riparian authority has not been consulted. I can't see any consultation with Peel Ports, who are responsible for the conservancy. The other more practical aspect is that at a lot of time during the day, that those berths will just be mud. So, you know, I can't see that it's going to be viable as a berth, because a lot of the time those boats will not be able to get on off because they'll be stuck on the mud. And I'm very suspicious, like colleagues already said, that this will end up with residential boats on it again, and we'll have to go through the whole saga of enforcement action. I think the easiest way to deal with this is to go back to what the inspector said, that the site should be cleared and left as it was. And I would like to add in addition that fence should go as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other councillor member? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, it's not unusual for issues which have been the subject of enforcement to come forward as fresh planning applications with conditions as a means to take the issue forward. But the thing I wanted to ask of officers is, isn't there another process to go through, even if we granted the planning permission tonight, in terms of Medway Maritime organisation having to the Maritime Management Organisation, I beg your pardon, needing to approve the proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Now go over to Peter Hockney.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer your question first, Councillor Jones, yes, there is a different legislative procedure that they need to go through after planning, and they are aware of that. And if members were to grant the consent tonight, that's when they would start the process. In terms of, I think, a few of the matters that have been raised, I think Councillor Galvin raised the issue of, I think, the fence, which you can see in these slides here. I don't disagree, but that's not the applicant's fence. That's outside of the application site. So the applicant doesn't have control or has not built that fence. So it's not part of the of their controlling land. And that links to, I think, the point that Councillor Etheridge was raising earlier about the legal rights across the land, and whether or not the applicant has rights across to the shoreline and indeed the toilet block there at the moment. But as members will know, legal rights of access to land are not a planning consideration that we can give any weight to. That would be a private legal matter that the two parties will resolve between themselves. And if an agreement cannot be reached and the development cannot proceed, then it cannot proceed. The granting of planning permission has no bearing on rights of access or any other legal covenants between private individuals. So if that prevents it, it prevents it irrespective of the granting of planning permission. I think the other thing just to go back to is the key message from the inspector in the enforcement appeal was that the houseboat caused significant visual harm. That houseboat has been removed following the dismissal of the appeal. He considered that the piles themselves, if I get the wording again, caused a small degree of visual harm, and that was for 18 piles at their original height. This application is for the retention of 10 of those 18 at a lower height. So if 18 at a significant height is a small degree of harm, I would suggest that 10 at a lower height is an even smaller degree of harm, which is why we're not looking at a reason for refusal based on the visual harm of the piles. And again, the inspector considered that there was no harm from the ramp and the jetty here. So again, it would be unreasonable to refuse it on the impact of that aspect of the application. So it's, yes, the enforcement notice was served and we successfully defended that at appeal. But I think, as Councillor Jones alluded to, we do have to treat future applications on their merits based on what's proposed at that time, and indeed how the application has responded to particularly the inspector's conclusions on the appeal. And as I say, to my mind, the application in front of members now has responded well to the conclusions of that appeal. The conditions which are recommended as part of the recommendation have been discussed with the applicant, who are the applicant satisfied that they are able to comply with those recommended conditions and be in a position that they can run a business as put forward. So I don't have any concerns regarding any likely breaches of those conditions because they've been agreed with the applicant's agent. If, as members know, in the future conditions are breached, then there are enforcement tools available, which obviously we've used previously on this site in terms of the enforcement notice. The enforcement notice remains on the land, so any use of waterborne vessels within the red line area covered by the enforcement notice for residential purposes would be in contravention of the enforcement notice, so we wouldn't have to go through the serving of a fresh notice or indeed any appeal, because the notice is already there covering any future concerns regarding a houseboat or a residential use of that part of the river. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So before, what was there before? A houseboat?
Yes, if I take you to the aerial photograph, you can see the houseboat there in a projecting out from the shoreline. In terms of the boat itself, it was a hull with a wooden structure on top, which was 2 stories in height, which I think was a significant element of the visual harm identified by the inspector because of its large scale and its bulk. And I think as Councillor Galvin was articulating earlier, there are a number of views across the river from the section shoreway and from the footpaths and the roadways that run through Lower Upnor, and the scale and the bulk of that houseboat interrupted those views to quite a significant extent, and obviously that's what the inspector found greatest issue with. Thank you.
Was that actually stated that they said it's the height of it? Because my concern is here there's going to be a lot more boats, isn't there, than just one?
Yes, let me find the part of the appeal decision. Here we go. If I read from the appeal decision, the most significant visual impact arises from the houseboat itself. It's based on a Thames lighter, a type of barge. This has been converted by the construction of a 2-storey wooden structure onto the hull. Thus, the boat is now tall, angular and blocky. The added structure has some of the character of a 2-storey flat roof building or residential cabin. Indeed, viewed at a distance, if the hull is obscured, it could be mistaken for a building, although at closer quarters, it is clearly a houseboat. So it describes the impact of that two-storey flat roof wooden structure on top of the hull as being a particularly sort of unusual and, dare I say, alien feature in that sort of shoreline element, which would obviously not be the case with typical boats that moor up and then go off at a later date.
Right, so is that in the conditions to stop something like that at all being there again?
In terms of the size of the boats, I don't think we have conditioned, but in terms of the, oops, fine, excuse me, clouting the microphone. In terms of the numbers of boats, we've got a condition requiring those. We've got a condition, obviously, preventing securing it for leisure-based self-propelled craft. So the houseboat, because of its design and its scale, was not self-propelled. It had to be dragged or towed to the site and fixed where it was. It wasn't under self-propellation. I don't know. So this condition 2 then basically enables that the craft that are on there have to essentially come and go under their own steam.
Okay. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to ask the officers their response to the objections raised by the Rochester Oyster and Floating Fishery, who stated on page 32 that the ROFF have not agreed to disruption caused to the riverbed, which is a requirement of the Act of Parliament, and irrespective of any planning permission granted without their agreement, the development is illegitimate. Does this not, in fact, give the Rochester Oyster and Floating Fishery a veto over this?
Pete, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you. In terms, as I say, in terms of any other requirements for agreement, then the applicant would need to secure those outside of the planning process. It wouldn't be for the planning permission to deal with any agreements which are outside, essentially, the granting of planning permission. So, in terms of that agreement, then they would need to seek that from the relevant bodies, as I think Councillor Jones also raised in terms of the Marine Management Organisation and the agreement and permission from them that would be required.
Yeah. So, if I may continue, Madam Chair, if we in fact grant this this permission, aren't we going to look rather stupid and have egg on our face if the ROFF and the Marine Management Organisation turn around and say, this can't go ahead? Why not? It'd be far better just to recognise his apparent veto or possible veto and refuse the application.
In short, no, because there is no planning reason to refuse it based on that. That is different legislation and a different legislative arena that there are no planning policies for. So, in the same way that if we had a block of flats which members granted and subsequently they couldn't get building control approval, then that doesn't reflect badly or anything on a planning decision, because it's a different legislative requirement. So the two are very separate in that regard. Thank you.
So it begs the question, why didn't they get this permission in the first place?
Well, I think it's one of those, isn't it? Which one do you do first? And so I think it's obviously up to the applicant whether they pursue the planning permission first or the other agreements first. they've chosen the planning permission. There's no requirement to do one before the other. So, as I say, members need to consider this on its planning merits, and not in relation to other legislation.
Well, if I had a car with bald tyres, I'd make sure I get those bald tyres fixed before I took it to get an MOT.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I'm really torn with this one. There's a lot of things that I am sort of concerned about, but I'll go to Councillor Hamdishe first.
Thank you very much. I just want some clarity on one of the recommendations that stipulates no more than 15 waterborne vessels. I'm rather unclear as to the working definition of the vessel and what could 15 vessels look in real terms, considering the construction types can vary, the size can vary again. So I just want clarity around that. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the condition is based on the maximum for the site. In terms of the diagram and plan that they've submitted, obviously that shows a much smaller number, but some of the craft are of a larger size. So there's obviously the ability to have smaller vessels, in which case they could moor more of them on that stretch of the pontoon. So the purpose of ensuring that there was a fixed number was so that we could tie down the SAMS payment as well, to ensure that there was essentially adequate compensation relating to the disturbance from any recreation. And as I say, 15 was considered the absolute maximum that could go on there, which is why we've attached that as a condition.
Sure, if I could just come back. So technically speaking, 15 jet skis or those types of vessels, as far as you're concerned, it's going to be within the limits.
In terms of, yeah, they are waterborne vessels, I guess, aren't they? So it would be.
But the disruption is disproportionate to the size of the vessel. One of those jet skis creates a lot of disruption for fisheries and for the environment, for noise and all of that. So it's disproportionate. The size is not comparable to the harm potentially caused by 15 of those.
Yeah, I think you've got to look at what a reasonable likelihood is. That's what we're looking at as a local planning authority. What's the reasonable likelihood of 15 jet skis mooring on there daily and being used daily? I would suggest there's probably not a high reasonable likelihood of that occurring. If that did occur, then in terms of the use, then they couldn't use it within the winter months, which was the concern in terms of the disturbing of the wintering birds and their foraging habits around the shoreline. So they couldn't use them for those 4 months in any case. So it's, as I say, it's looking at the reasonable likelihood, looking at the proposals and what the policies in the local plan encourage in terms of leisure uses on the river, and bearing in mind that the fallback position is that the existing wharf could have boats moored on it anyway. Obviously, it couldn't be used for residential purposes, but as part of the appeal decision, it was common ground that the fallback position was that boats could be moored at this location, and that would also include jet skis or speedboats or other aspects. So I think it's, yeah, I think it sort of it's dangerous to get down into that level of detail when you're looking at the general principles.
I understand it's the last push, comeback. In terms of leisure activities, they're normally aligned around a business model. So it's not outside the realm of any imagination to have 15 jet skis there as a business model, because the environment is conducive for that. If you look at other parts of the River Medway, do they have the same constraints around 15, say, vessels around a similar type of situation, or are we creating a precedence with just this location here?
I think in terms of the other locations up and down the river, they are likely to be historic, but they're not covered by similar conditions. In terms of the, as I say, the use of it, and I think as you were saying, the business plan is put forward by the applicants is that they are looking for a place for leisure craft to moor on their trips down the Medway and to stay for a few nights. That's their business model that they're putting forward. So, as I say, that's what we're looking at in terms of the conditions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back. Two things. I thank the officer for bringing it to our attention regarding that permission is required from third parties, even though it's not a planning consideration. But considering they've made illegal pilings and an illegal ramp, knowing that they've been situated there for over a year, and the officer has quite candidly told us they were aware that they needed to get permission from these third parties, why didn't they do so? Because they knew they wouldn't have got it. But if they had done so, it would have strengthened their application on the previous application they made. So what he said is basically really untrue. The applicants absolutely know this, and they've got no intention of complying with that. Secondly, I think we've been misled by the officer here yet again. He said quite candidly, we have enforced that inspector's ruling. Well, you haven't. You never ever removed the pilings and the ramp once the boat had gone. It's still there. And that's the whole discussion here tonight. They were never removed. That enforcement was not done. So please retract that statement. Okay, the boat's gone, but the rest of the stuff is still there. We never actually complied with that ruling to remove it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Golvin.
Yes, thank you for letting me come back. One of the things that is key is that it says here in condition 2, at no time shall there be any residential use of the moored craft. Now, how do we actually enforce that? Most crafts have got bunks, galleys. They're perfectly capable of being lived in. On the canals, if you are a permanent moorer, you have to get permanent permission from the British Waterways to do that. If you are on a hirer or your boat is continually cruising, most places you can moor up on the canals restrict that to no more than 4 or 5 days, and there's notices displayed to that effect. And certainly when I've had canal holidays, you've seen the British Waterways people enforce that by putting notices on the boat. So somebody could actually live on those boats for 3 or 4 months. Is that what, is that acceptable or is it not acceptable? You said there is no residential use, but then it's not defined how you define residential use. I mean, people could stay there for the whole summer. I can't think of a nicer spot to stay for a few weeks in the summer. So it's a beautiful aspect there. So I think there's too many holes in this. And, I'll go back to the point about condition 6 again. If you felt that it was need to put that condition on, that that there are no maintenance or refueling. That is admitting that those boats are likely to do damage. How is that going to be enforced? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Pete, do you want to come in on that?
Sorry, Chair. I don't want to labour the point too much, but I think the conditions that are set out prevents residential use of any boats that are moored on the proposed jetty. Condition 2 states that there's no residential use. Condition 4, as amended in the supplementary, only allows for overnight accommodation for 5 consecutive days. It also requires the applicant to keep a log and record of those, names and addresses and contact details of those occupying, and that log and record is made available for inspection by the local planning authority with 48 hours written notice. So they can't stay on this site for 3 months or over the summer. They can only stay for 5 days, and that's what the condition requires. The requirement for a written log to be kept is a very common way of monitoring occupation for holiday lets and the like, and is perfectly enforceable. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Peake.
Yeah, I've been hesitant on this because as I think you was about to say, Chair, you've got mixed thoughts about this. I'm glad that members opposite have asked those questions about how this is going to be enforced. In reality, what sort of policing does tend to take place at these docks? Is there personnel that actually does go along and check that people aren't there for longer than they should be? Because we've got the conditions, but what actually happens once it's granted? Is there a systematic method or whatever process to deal with that? That is the question. On the face of it, couldn't actually see what the problem was. Sorry, I've heard of your concerns and I'm wondering if I'm missing something. On the face of it, it just seems to be somewhere that people can just dock, as you said, just going down the river. So what's the problem? On the other hand, what does concern me is, I'm thinking about the right way to put this. I can only think of the word attitude, as in bad faith. That's already been demonstrated, and therefore that's an issue of trust. But I'm not so sure that's an actual planning reason for turning something down. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Dave, do you want to come in?
Chair, thank you. And I should be keeping quiet on this, so I won't touch on any of the planning merits of this at all, because I've had no involvement in the application. I just wanted to clarify one thing, and Pete, you may want to just explain. I appreciate there are strong feelings in relation to this application, one way or the other, and there is an enforcement background to this. I just wanted to come back on the comment that my officer has misled the committee. And Pete, you may want to clarify, but my understanding is in terms of enforcing the enforcement notice and that appeal decision, we require the vessel to be removed, and it has been. You did require the piles to be removed in accordance with that appeal decision, but because of the nature and the ecology, there is a time period when where they couldn't remove the piles. And by the time that period was up, that's when they submitted this application. That's my understanding, but as I said, I've had no involvement in that. But I just wanted to come back, and I appreciate the strong feelings, but I just want to emphasise my officer has not misled the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other member? No. Right, Councillor Peake, did you want to come in again? Your microphone's not on.
So are you able to answer my question, even though it's not strictly a planning thing, about the policing of sites like this, please?
Yeah, sorry, just waiting for the nod. I think you raised 2 points, and I think I think you almost answered the second point yourself in terms of the concern that an applicant may not abide by rules and regulations is not a planning consideration, and I think you more or less got there yourself in terms of the question that you were asking. So, as I say, the applicant's willingness or otherwise is not a planning consideration. In terms of the monitoring of the site, members will know that we, in terms of active monitoring, we don't actively monitor conditions because, as you know, we have thousands of applications a year, and we don't have the resources to proactively go out and make sure that everyone's abiding by every condition that we attach. However, if reports are made to the council that there is a breach of condition, then we will visit and we will investigate each one of those reports. So if obviously in this case any of the local residents who have written in on the application, or indeed the parish council, have concerns that conditions are not being complied with, then they can make the report, and we will investigate every report that's made. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I'm really torn with this application. I don't like the way that the applicants have gone about things and not getting those permissions that they need, but that's not a reason for refusal. It's if we were to refuse it, whether there is a reason, an actual planning reason for refusal, if anyone has one. And do you think we're a lot more likely to lose at appeal if this was to be appealed, or?
I think in terms of the previous appeal decision, it was very much focused on the visual impact of the boat and the piles. The boat has been removed, and as I say, the craft which are to be docked in this location are very different in character. So that significant visual harm has been removed. And as I say, in terms of the piles, there were 18 and there are now proposed to be 8 at a lower height. The inspector only gave that a small degree of visual harm when there were 18 tall piles. So I don't think we would be successful if we were to seek a refusal on the remaining 8.
Well, even as having as many as 15 boats there, 'cause that's quite a lot, isn't it?
I think in terms of the boats and the craft, obviously, if there's 15, they're going to be smaller. If you've got larger boats, then there's going to be fewer of them. So it's an area of the river, which you can see on that aerial photograph, where sort of boats is not an uncommon sight on the river in that location. So I would not want to argue that boats moored on the side of the river would be visually harmful in terms of the leisure craft element.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Golvin, you wanted to come in first, didn't you?
I still go back to the condition 6. If we feel that doing any maintenance on those boats is likely to damage the environment in that area, and the officers accepted that we can't enforce it because it's not, you know, we are putting, you know, as far as I can see, we've got an ecological reason to turn down. If that area is sensitive, particularly with the, you know, the risk of contamination of the water has been well explained by both the local councillors. Surely that is a good reason to turn it down, because, you know, it's one thing to ban maintenance, but, you know, if people are, unless it is rigorously enforced, that will just happen because that's the nature of having a boat on a windswept river. It will need a lot of maintenance. So I feel that if you've put that condition in, surely that is sufficient as a planning reason for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you once again for letting me come back. For members here who've ever been on the river cruise with the Mayor, know fully well that boats moor onto each other. So even though you may only have 6 or 7 boats actually attached to the jetty, quite often river cruise boats just moor up against each other. So you all have often large craft, 15 of them there. So, and once again, I'll refer you back to the noise they're going to make manoeuvring in and out. And also 15 boats, or let's say 15 families on boats, using that toilet. We've heard about ecology, removing those piles. Nobody bothered about that, putting them in. But what about the ecology and biodiversity with 15 families worth of sewage going into the river just there each and every day? I think there's plenty of reasons why we can refuse this and find reasons for doing so.
Thank you. Any other member? No? Okay, so now move over to Councillor Jones, Vice Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chair. The application in front of us is the land to the south of the former Upnor Public Convenience, including foreshore and bed of the River Medway, Lower Upnor, Rochester. I move approval of the application with conditions 1 to 11 as set out, with the amended condition 4 on the supplementary agenda in relation to time issues. I move all that lot, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Those for oh, sorry, is that seconded? Yeah, thank you. Those for the officer's recommendation of approval.
That's 5, Chair.
Those against?
That's 9, Chair.
Okay, I'll now go over to Vice Chairperson Councillor Jones to for refusal of the application.
Well, I probably need
Chair, can we
some
have some
grounds.
reasons, please?
Sorry, yeah, we need reasons for the refusal. So
Just what I was saying.
what refusals for the people who refused it? Yeah, Councillor Etheridge.
Basically, what's been stated within the officer's report from residents and other members, the lack of continually abiding by the regulations that are already in place, both in their original marina where they were evicted from, the illegal pilings they put in, the illegal houseboat being there, the contempt for this planning committee. My head's being shaken. Then I'm going to go back to, I think that when we talk about the ecology of the area, the biodiversity, the sewage that's going to be poured into that river, that's just not acceptable. And I'm sure the officers can find something around that.
Thank you. Now go over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Chair, can I just come back on
Oh,
that?
yeah, sorry.
That first reason is not a planning reason. In the councillor's words, contempt of the planning system is not a reason to refuse a planning application.
Yeah, okay, Peter.
So, can you articulate in more policy-based words, please?
Councillor Etheridge.
I'm afraid that my arguments on this are obviously not being accepted on the principle that it's not a planning reason, but I'm more than happy for Councillor Jones to propose that there's a refusal and the officers come forward with the appropriate reasons for so.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. Is that okay?
Chair, you've got to give members. You've got to give us something to go on here. As Pete says, the The first area in terms of contempt, I understand members' concerns on that, but that's not a reason for refusal. So at least give us some headings in terms of your concerns that we can then formulate some words on. Don't know whether the legal officer wants to say anything further on that.
No, not really. It's just that, you know, in order for you to vote against, you've got to have some sort of planning-based reason. So, for instance, I don't.
Chair, at the moment, I've heard impact on ecology and biodiversity. I think Councillor Pearce has got his hand up. Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've just got some headings which might be useful. So I've got conflict with the enforcement appeal decision and inspectors' findings, unacceptable visual harm to the riverside character and public views, risk of incremental residential use and inadequate planning control, unresolved access and land control issues, unacceptable impact on ecology and wintering birds, failure to demonstrate need in this location, undermining the integrity of the planning system that's actually here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Dave, do you want to come in?
Chair, I think Peter needs to come back on those. Sorry, Councillor Pearce, you said them very quickly. There are some which are absolutely planning considerations, visual harm, ecology, biodiversity. There were others that I heard you mention which aren't planning reasons in terms of the access, which, as Pete says, is a land ownership issue, not a planning issue. But Pete, I haven't noted them all down. Did you want to come back at all?
So isn't it the less the better that's been said before? So if you've got two there, can they be used?
Chair, I'm just trying to get them down. Apologies, Chair. Just trying to get them down to the planning reasons. And Councillor Pearce has said a number there. And maybe we go through them one by one and Pete can say, is that whether that's the planning reason or not? And then we should get down to a few which we can then formulate into words.
Right, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of those points that Councillor Pearce just raised, again, most of those are not policy-based reasons. So I think the two that I picked up on that were planning considerations were visual impact and ecology. I would strongly advise against visual impact based on the conclusion of the inspector at the last appeal, where we're looking at a much reduced development and a much less visually intrusive development than the one that he determined was of a small visual impact in terms of the piles. And as I say, that leaves ecology. In terms of the reason for refusal to be crafted in regard to that, it's possible to defend, but I think in terms of the difficulty is articulating what the harm of this jetty would be over and above the existing use of the river.
Right. Councillor Anang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about lack of information on the size of the boats that will be moored at a place? Because if the size of the boats are big, then definitely it's going to affect the character of the area. So if we don't know the size of the boat that will be berthing there, then any boat can berth there. It can be bigger, it can be smaller. So if we ask them to give us more information about the sizes of the boat, that will be there out of the 15, because we don't know the information, so we don't know how it's going to affect the character of the area.
I think in terms of, as I say, a reason for refusal based on the potential size of the boat, given the fact that they're going to be smaller than the the houseboat that was on the site, as I say, gives me great concern. I think unless unless members are of a view that if we were able to discuss and agree size of craft with the applicant and seek a condition to be attached to that would overcome members' concerns, if that's the committee's view, then there could be a potential to defer the application to come up with an agreed size of craft to essentially to agree a condition on that. But obviously, I don't want to go away and agree a size of craft in discussion with members and indeed the applicant, if members' overriding concern is ecology. So I think there's a few elements that maybe committee need to discuss a bit further as to whether that could be a solution that the committee is happy with, or whether that they are focused on a refusal of the application.
So, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, for letting me come back in. Just to expand on the ecology heading. So, unacceptable impact on ecology and wintering birds. Insufficient survey evidence has been submitted to properly assess impacts on wintering and foraging birds, intertidal habitats within the Medway Estuary Marine Conservation Zone. The proposed seasonal restrictions are relied upon to mitigate harm, but unacceptable ecology impacts remain uncertain and unresolved, particularly given the loss and degradation of intertidal habitat and cumulative disturbance along the estuary, contrary to Medway local plan policies BNE 37 and BNE 39, MPPF paragraphs 187 and 195, and South East Inshore Marine Plan Policy SE MPA 1.
So is that acceptable?
I think, as I said, I think ecology is a defendable reason for refusal, but I think it probably needs that discussion, and obviously there will be a vote on that reason. But whether, as I say, whether some of those members that voted against it were voting based on ecology, or were they voting based on uncertainty about the visual impact? And I think that's what we need to get to the bottom of, to decide whether we are refusing on ecology or whether we are deferring for additional information about the size of the craft.
Okay, thank you.
And I think there's a few that voted for refusal that we haven't heard from, so we don't know which side they sit in that regard.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, did you want to come in?
Chair, thank you. I think my question is for Councillor Pearson as well. Articulated that concern. Is that something you're moving, Councillor Pearce?
If you want me to, I can move that, but if I think it'd be helpful if I also explain fully the visual harm one. So unacceptable visual harm to the riverside character and public views. The proposed development, by reason of its scale, layout, piling, pontoons and cumulative river clutter, would harm the open and informal character of the upland riverside, interrupt important public views along the River Medway, and erode the historic riverscape valued by the local community. The development would fail to respect the sensitive visual setting when viewed from the public riverside promenade, public rights of way, and the opposite riverbank, including St Mary's Island. And this is contrary to Medway local plan policies BNE 1 and BNE 18 and MPF paragraphs 135 and 212 to 216. But yeah, if they're happy to include that as well, I'll move both.
So any other member have any other comments? Did anyone want the application deferred, or do you want to decide it tonight? Is there anyone who voted for refusal? Is there would you want it deferred if they went back to find out sort out how big the boats are? No. Councillor Galvin.
But I think there are bases for the effect on the visual aspect, because if you look at the aerial photograph, it shows clearly that there are very few areas where you've got an open aspect over the, you know, the river and the river flats. I mean, particularly at low tide, even in non-winter times, there are still quite a number of waders that are, if you know where to go, you can see that's one of the few spots in Upnor where you've got an unfettered view of the river. And yes, there are a lot of boats, but you can have too much of a good thing as far as having, you know, do we really want non-stop boat moorings along the entire length of the river? I think you've got to have a bit of both. Yes, we want the boat moorings, but on the other hand, there is a view that is very ancient, the pre-industrialisation view of the river, and that little spot at Upnor is actually is one of the few places where you can look at the river and the mudflats at low tide without any obstruction. So I think that visual aspect is worthy of preservation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Galvin. Yeah.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you, members, for a good debate, an informed debate. Councillor Pearce has moved 2 reasons for refusal. Obviously, I would like him if he could, if it is refused on those grounds, if he could email Pete the words tomorrow, that'd be fantastic. I think 2 things I would suggest, if that's okay, Councillor Peake. I know you wanted to come in. Is there a seconder to those 2 reasons, Councillor Etheridge? And then secondly, just a suggestion, members, is we have a vote on each of those reasons for refusal, so we know if both are supported by the committee. So we'd have a vote, first of all, if it's okay, Chair, for the ecology reason, and then a vote separately for the visual reason. And if they're both supported unanimously by the committee, then we've got...
Okay. So those for the reason for refusal for ecology.
That's 14, Chair.
So is it 14? Right, so therefore that's, we use the ecology one, and the, for visual impact.
That's 13, Chair.
Thank you. Therefore, those 2 reasons will be used. Councillor Peake.
I was going to say, I think the words that Councillor Galvin said about the historical aspect does give it more weight. So if those particular words could be put into there. I was concerned that we were inclined to be turning this down for emotional reasons. We don't like a bad attitude. I think actually Councillor Pearce maybe has got enough here for us to be able to turn it down. So I'm pleased to hear actual planning reasons for turning this down. But the more beef to it, the better. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
Chair, if it's okay, I totally agree with you, Councillor Peake. If it's okay with members, Councillor Pearce will email his the 2 reasons to Pete. Pete will have a look at them, check the wording of them, and then agree them with the planning spokes, if that's okay with the committee.
Thank you. Now move over to Vice Chairperson Councillor Jones.
Well, thank you, Chair. I move all that which the Chief Planning Officer has just said. You know, if Councillor Pearce would care to copy what he's moved this evening to the Chair, Vice Chair and Chief Planning Officer and Development Services Manager and spokespersons, then, you know, a consultation can go on from there, I think, on the actual wording. I so move.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Those for refusal of the application.
That's 13, Chair.
Those against?
That's one, Chair.
Thank you. So now, sorry?
Oh, sorry.
So were you for refusal of the application? Yeah, okay, thank you. So the application is therefore refused. All right, now we're going to have a short break. Welcome back to tonight's Planning Committee. We now go to agenda item 6, which is planning application 7 Camden Road. Aaron Nichols, Senior Planning, will be presenting this, so over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Before I start my presentation, can I draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda for 1 point, a rebuttal letter which has been received in relation to this application from the agent. This letter has been considered but does not affect the officer's recommendation. This application seeks planning permission for the conversion of the existing C3 house to a C4 6-person HMO, and the application is being brought to committee as a result of it falling with an area covered by the Article 4 direction in relation to HMOs. This slide shows the site, shows a location plan with the site outlined in red. And this slide shows the application site in relation to its wider context, with Pier Road located towards the north and Shotterton Road towards the south. In regards to the surrounding developments, the surrounding built form is predominantly 2-storey dwellings with some dormer-style extensions alongside a small number of single-storey bungalows to the south. And the properties in the surrounding area are predominantly formed of single household occupancies. Here we can see the property when viewed from Camden Road. It's the building in the middle in white with the black timber detailing. Here we can see some pictures. So the application was previously granted an LDC prior to the Article 4 being brought into use, and the applicant has submitted these pictures showing that the works were being undertaken. Here we can see the previous elevations and the section plan, and the previous floor plans, which show it as a 3-bedroom house. And here we can see the previously approved elevations and section plan, and the previous floor plans as a 6-bedroom. Again, this was under the lawful development certificate. Here we can see the proposed elevations and section plans and the floor plans. The proposal is for a 6-bedroom HMO. In regards to the proposed floor plans, it's considered that bedroom 6 would be served by 2 roof lights. It's considered by virtue of the sloping roof and the arrangement of the room, future occupiers will be provided with a poor level of occupier amenity with limited outlook. If I just go back to here, you can see on the sectional diagram here, bedroom 6, and the proposed roof light that would serve it. In regards to shared amenity space, policy T8 of the Reg 22 local plan is clear in its requirement that HMO developments must provide communal space of at least 1 reception room and a kitchen or equivalent space to be used by the proposed residents. In this instance, the scheme fails to provide a separate reception room, with the only communal room proposed being a small kitchen to the rear, which would not provide sufficient space for all of the proposed residents to sit around a table and eat as a household. Furthermore, by virtue of the size and limitations of the layout, the kitchen would be a thoroughfare, providing the only access to the rear amenity space. The arrangements would reduce the meaningful space to support the day-to-day activities of 6 individuals living together, other than cooking, with no other communal space within the property that would result in the occupiers being reliant on living, relaxing, working from their bedroom. Here we can see the proposed location of the HMO in relation to the surrounding HMOs within a 500 metre radius marked on the map. For reference, there are 27 HMOs. It's considered that the proposed HMO would provide a poor level of occupiers' amenity, contrary to policy B and T of the adopted local plan and T8 of the Reg 22 local plan, and as such is recommended for refusal. Sorry.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. The Conservative group on this side fully support the officer's proposal, and I would like to propose, if the Labour group also support his proposal, we go straight to the Vice Chair to vote on it as refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whilst I've in quite a few planning committees now been arguing for the approval of HMOs, because I believe it's a housing stock that is desperately needed by quite a number of people here in Medway. I fully accept it's got to be of a high standard, and this one is obviously not of a high standard. There is a question in the back of my mind, and I'm wondering, Madam Chair, perhaps it would be best dealt with as part of a not a committee, but at a sort of a training session, is because what has changed now? The lawful development certificate, which was issued on the 17th of November last year, was for approval. Now we've got to this stage. Now we've got the Article 4. So it would be useful, perhaps, if we could have some training on this. Why has it changed? What was acceptable in November last year is not acceptable now, and certainly we have turned them down in the past where there hasn't. Certainly the room sizes, because of sloping, it being in the roof void, which was perfectly acceptable. Acceptable way of turning things down, but I think some guidance for members might be useful. Probably tonight is not the right place, but perhaps could that be done sometime in the future, please?
Yeah, let Dave come in on that.
Chair, thank you very much. I mean, absolutely right. The Chair has already asked myself and Pete to do some training for members on HMOs. So we're just waiting to get some appeal decisions in on more recent ones, and then we will do that training. So we'll get that in the diaries. Very short in relation to this. Cabinet in December took a decision that to instruct me to get an Article 4 served in relation to 7 wards. That Article 4 came into effect on the 22nd of January this year. So in terms of the lawful use here, they submitted a lawful application last year. At that time, there was no Article 4, so that the conversion to a small-scale HMO was lawful at that stage. However, they started implementing it, but didn't bring it into use. So therefore, as soon as the Article 4 came into place and the use wasn't there, it was no longer lawful, hence this application. So that's a very short response to that. And as you say, Councillor Galvin, it then brings it into assessment against planning policy. And as Aaron very well articulated, this doesn't comply with both our existing and an emerging planning policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Peake.
Well, this is actually something I feel quite strongly about. It is personal. I went from living in a massive villa, come back to England. I was homeless, and I was so pleased to have my own roof on my head. I lived in an HMO like this that had no communal space whatsoever. I was so grateful to have a roof over my head, but when I think about how depressing that was, there was literally nowhere to be inside that building. So it was completely reliant on the weather outside. And I know we've got to encouraging housing, but not at any cost. So I'm definitely going to be voting against this. Not adequate, not suitable.
Councillor Hamdishe.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and keep this one brief, and I do have some sympathy for the applicant on this one because of the work that he has done. Certainly the build finish, looking at the supplementary letter, is of a high standard, but it doesn't change the fact that I have canvassed on those streets. I've spoken to residents and taken a look at the HMO survey and the proliferation of those types of units in that area. It is a bugbear. It is a gripe on every doorstep. They don't like it. But back to my central point in terms of the facilities there, that kitchen really upsets me because if you've got 6 families there, the word thoroughfare was used. I think it's a so decent word to use. I'll use something similar because there's no way to sit down. 6 people cooking in there at any given time, and the only access point is the door to get you into the garden. So people are either going to be queuing in the garden to get access to the kitchen, to wait for somebody to finish cooking, is unacceptable. It's a style of living that it shouldn't be acceptable at all. If the applicant is prepared to reduce, I'm not sure in terms of what that would mean, that might make sense, but certainly in this current configuration, it doesn't work. Even if we didn't have Article 4 in place, I would say no for that. Thank you.
Any other member? No, I now go over to Vice Chair, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. 7 Camden Road, Gillingham. Recommendation is for refusal on the ground set out in the report. I so move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Those for the officer's recommendation of refusal.
That's 15, Chair.
The application is therefore refused. Now moving on to agenda item 7, planning application for 53 Imperial Road, Gillingham. Amy Shardlow, Senior Planner, will be presenting this application. So over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks planning permission for the conversion of the existing C3 dwelling house to a C4 6-person HMO. The application again is being brought to committee as it's within an area covered by the Article 4 direction in relation to HMOs. This slide shows the location plan with the site outlined in red and the wider context showing Chatham Hill and Upper Luton Road. Here we can see the proposed block plan and the existing and proposed elevations. It should be noted that the alterations, including a single-storey rear extension, L-shaped dormer and roof lights to the front, can be undertaken without the benefit of planning permission and have been previously approved under the LDC listed within the committee report. This slide shows the existing and proposed floor plans. This is where the concern is raised. Bedroom 5 would be served by 2 roof lights, and there is a sloping roof arrangement of the room, which would mean that the future occupiers would have a poor level of amenity with limited outlook. In regards to the shared amenity space, as Aaron's noted, policy T8 of the new local plan at Reg 22 requires that HMO developments must provide communal space by the means of at least 1 reception room and a kitchen or equivalent space to be used by residents. In this instance, the scheme fails to provide a separate reception room with only 1 communal room being the small kitchen at 11 square metres, which would not provide sufficient space for all of the proposed residents. As also shown, this is actually the exit into the rear garden, which in its majority is covered by the cycle store arrangement. This slide just shows the street scene and the property itself. And then finally, again, this is the HMO density within the area. As you can see, we do have Chatham Hill, so this does cut off quite a lot of them, but it does have 18 HMOs within this area and 1 on the same street. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is based. Oh, sorry, Dave, did you want to come in?
Chair, thank you. I just wanted to clarify something in terms of the call into committee. It only relates to small-scale HMOs, which would previously have been lawful. What Cabinet did is when they instructed me to serve the Article 4 direction, because they wanted an immediate Article 4, there are compensation implications of that, and therefore members wanted all applications for these C3 to C4 HMOs to come to committee, whether for approval or for refusal. So other HMOs, larger scale ones, don't fall within that trigger. It's just these small scale ones where the Cabinet trigger is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? No, I now go over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. 53 Imperial Road, Gillingham. Recommendation to the Planning Committee is for refusal on grounds 1 and 2 as set out in the report. I so move. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Those for the officer's recommendation for refusal.
That's 15, Chair.
The application is therefore refused. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is another HMO planning application for St George's Road, Gillingham. Aaron Nichols, Senior Planner, will be presenting this application, so over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start this presentation, can I draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda again for one point, which is the inclusion of an additional condition in relation to the submission of a refuse management strategy. This application seeks planning permission from the conversion of an existing C3 house to a C4 six-person HMO, along with the erection of an L-shaped dormer, and the application is being brought to committee as a result of it falling within an area covered under the Article 4 direction, and for the reason Dave has just mentioned. This slide shows the site location, with the site outlined in red. And this slide shows the application site in relation to the wider context, with Trinity Road located towards the north and Saunders Street to the south. In regards to the surrounding developments, the surrounding built form is predominantly two-storey dwellings, with some dormer-style extensions, and further along Saunders Street, there is a three-storey modern block of flats, as well as the large block of council-owned flats. But the properties are predominantly formed of single household occupation. Here we can see the property when viewed from St George's Street. And here we can see an aerial view from Saunders Street, looking down towards George Street. As set out in the report, the scheme was granted a lawful development certificate for the conversion of a HMO with an L-shaped dormer, but this was not implemented. The applicant has confirmed that no works have been undertaken internally or externally to date. Here we can see the previous elevations and the previous floor plan as a 3-bedroom house. And here are the previously approved elevations and the floor plans as a 6-bedroom HMO. Here we can see the proposed elevations. And here are the proposed floor plans as a 6-bedroom HMO. In regards to the proposed floor plans, it's considered that all of the bedrooms will be served by an adequate degree of natural light and afforded suitable outlook. The remaining communal spaces comprise of a separate 13.8 square metre kitchen and an 11.8 square metre communal living room, both on the ground floor, which would be shared amongst a total of 6 individuals, and they also provide access to the rear garden. The kitchen area is considered suitable as a general functional space for cooking and washing of clothes, whilst the living room is considered to be of a suitable size for the proposed number of residents. There is also a basement room for storage and a rear garden area, and as such, the property is considered to comply with policy T8 of the Reg 22 local plan. And here are the proposed sections. It should be noted that bedroom 6, which is located in the top part, the dormer windows are recessed down to provide actual outlook from the windows from the original one submitted. And here we can see the section site plan, which shows that there are cycle storage and refuse in the rear and the front elevation. Conditions are included for the submission of further details in relation to the cycle store, waste store, and the refuse strategy as set out in the supplementary agenda. And here we can see the proposed location of the HMO in relation to the surrounding HMOs within a 500-metre radius marked on the map, and there are 32 HMOs within that area. It is considered that the proposed HMO would provide a good level of occupier amenity and would meet the requirements of the adopted and the Reg 22 local plan, and as such is recommended at officer level for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just go back to that slide? I think it's a 6-bedroom one. Has that got a sloped roof, did you say? I just missed that bit. That has got a sloped roof. And what lighting does it have to it?
Sorry. So the dormer window that's proposed in it has been lowered. So originally when it came in, it was at a higher level. It's been lowered down to 1.4 metres to provide outlook as well as sunlight.
Sorry, say that again for the lighting.
So the dormer window that's proposed here, so originally when it came in, it was proposed to be at a higher location. It's been lowered down to 1.4 metres to provide an outlook as well as sunlight.
Right, because that was sort of the reasons for refusal in the other two, wasn't it? Because of the slope roof and the lighting.
So on my one, the other one, the window was higher up.
Right, okay. So without the slope roof, if you take off the slope part of the bedroom, does that meet the standards of how big a room should be?
Yes, it does
Without the
meet.
slope roof?
Yep,
Yeah.
it does.
Okay. And there's just one more thing. The only other thing that concerns me is less than a 5-minute walk away, or about a 5-minute walk away, is the student accommodation for 63 bedrooms that's just been approved to be an HMO. So to me, that can be saturation in the area. I know I brought that up, Dave, but it is saturation of HMOs in a small area, isn't it?
Chair, thank you very much. In terms of what we're looking at here it relates to the conversion of family homes, or what were family homes, into HMOs, which is what the Article 4 is looking to control. And then, as you say, it brings in that the assessment in terms of whether there's an overproliferation of them here. That's set out and described by Aaron in the report. In terms of the student one that you're referring to, I appreciate that there's been a lot of press on it, but it's essentially student accommodation is a form of an HMO. So that was then being converted to another form of an HMO. And I appreciate that's not the point that you're making, Chair. You're saying that with that, doesn't that add to that overproliferation? Our view is it doesn't take it above what would cause unacceptable harm to the area. Hence, we're recommending approval, Chair.
I just, to me, I just think that 63-bedroom HMO being nearby, to me, is oversaturation in the area. But I'll go over to members. So any members? Councillor Peake.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on page 72, neighbouring residential amenity, and second paragraph. So I hope I've got this right, otherwise it's embarrassing. But it says 3 existing 3-bedroom property could serve at least 4 individuals, potentially 6, 2 in each bedroom. One of the living rooms being used as a bedroom. So on the face of it, unlike the other applications, there's lots of amenity space. So this is thumbs up. Is it quite possible, though, and I know you can't, in planning terms, use a crystal ball to try and gaze in the future what might happen, but what concerns me is that other amenity communal space could just quietly be also used as a bedroom, and you end up having at least 8 people there rather than 6.
Chair, thank you very much. And it's a really good question, Councillor Peake. And I think that's where we work very closely with our private sector housing people in terms of the licensing as well as the planning side. And with the additional and selective licensing that members are bringing in, that will bring forward additional staff who will be enforcing the licensing and will be liaising with Pete and his team. Should they find that room has been changed from a living room into a bedroom, they will be informing us and we'll be able to take enforcement action.
Okay, any other member? No, so now go over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. The site is 3 St George's Road, Gillingham. Recommendation is for approval with conditions. The conditions are 1 to 6 as set out in the report, and in the supplementary agenda there's a condition 7 related to waste management, and I move all that lot. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Right. Those for the officer's recommendation for approval.
That's 11, Chair.
Those against? The application is therefore approved. So now we go on to agenda item 9, performance report. Dave Harris, Chief Planning Officer, will be presenting this. So over to you, Dave.
Chair, thank you very much. Firstly, going through the through the performance report. And as a rarity, I'm going to talk first of all about the likely changes coming forward in terms of new legislation and reform to the Planning Committee. And I know Councillor Galvin loves this subject, so I'm sure he'll have some comment. But in terms of changing coming forward, there was a consultation, as members saw see on page 77, there was a consultation in December last year on revisions to the National Policy Framework. That ended on the 10th of March. We commented on it. And it was described in the consultation as representing one of the most extensive national planning policy framework overhauls in over a decade, aiming to make the planning system more delivery-focused, transparent, and aligned with national priorities such as housing supply, infrastructure provision, and climate resilience. And then page 78, it sets out some of the things in the consultation. As members would expect, there was a significant number of comments, which the MHCLG are currently going through, and we're informed that the revised MPPF is likely to come forward in the summer, prior to the summer recess. We will see. It depends on whether they're able to go through those all the comments and address that. And then we have the Planning and Infrastructure Act 2025, which received royal assent in December. And the overall goal of the Act is to get Britain building again by increasing the speed and delivery of housing and infrastructure projects, addressing shortages and supporting economic growth. So there are a number of things that are coming out of that. One is spatial development strategies. Really pleased to see that coming forward. Also getting rid of the duty to cooperate, which has been a nightmare over the last 13 years. But regional planning coming back is a really good thing. It needs further legislation. There has been certain consultations recently in terms of what area we will cover. The consultation suggests it should be Kent and Medway together. We've responded to the consultation saying we agree. There's likely to be a further consultation in the not too distant future in terms of spatial development boards and the makeup of those. That will set out how many should be on a board and the makeup in terms of how many from Kent County Council, how many from Medway, but also whether there are non-voting members that can be part of that board. So we'll see that consultation shortly. It will move very quickly from consultation to legislation because they want us to get started working on the spatial development strategies prior to, certainly prior to the middle of this year. The other thing in relation to that, we've got certain money passed to us already, and we will be starting work on recruiting because I have no staff to work on that. Kent County Council have no staff to work on that, so we need to get a new team together. It will rely very much on working with existing local plans and emerging local plans, but it will require careful consultation and engagement with the districts. So although it will be produced by Kent and Medway working together, it's a regional plan looking very high level, it's very important that the districts feel a part of that, and in terms of the new unitaries, that they feel part of that as well. Second part of the Planning and Infrastructure Act the members should be aware of is the new style local plans. Now we're able to complete through the current way of doing local plans, as a number of councils are doing. There should be another 80 submitted to MHCLG by the end of this year. A number have fallen away already. Originally, they were thinking that it was going to be about 120 submitted by the end of this year. But like us, they are going through the pre-examination checklist. And unlike us, there were a number that didn't get through that. So we're advised not to submit. We were advised to submit and follow the recommendations, which is what we have done. So we're still working through that. The new style local plans, members, you'll be amazed to hear, we'll see local plans produced in 30 months, 30 months, not 30 years, 30 months. And then the final thing is in relation to the national scheme of delegation. Now, members will be aware that there was a consultation last year. The government have considered all the responses to that. They've done another consultation, very short one, setting out how they've taken on board the comments that we and others gave, and have set out very clearly what is likely to come forward. And the draft regulations indicate that that will come into effect on the 30th of September this year. So we're still waiting for the final regulations, but essentially what it will show is that you will have Schedule 1 applications and Schedule 2 applications. Schedule 1 applications will always be delegated, and that will include householder applications, minor commercial, minor residential, reserved matter applications where they are not built in a phased way, discharge of conditions, prior approval, permission in principles, Section 106s where they relate to Schedule 1 applications, non-material changes to planning permission, certificates of lawfulness, both existing and proposed, biodiversity gain plans, and certificates of appropriate alternative development. All those applications will be delegated. There then is Schedule 2 applications, which are ones which will be delegated unless they are triggered to committee. And Chair, I'm going to make you a little bit nervous in a minute, because the things that will trigger this to committee are the nominated officer and the nominated member together will go through the applications, and subject to a gateway consideration, will make a decision as to whether they're delegated or go to committee. And the nominated officer is the Chief Planning Officer, and the nominated member is the Chair of the Planning Committee. So there'll be a lot of responsibility on us, Chair, on that. The good thing is that it will not be subjective. It will be based on a gateway assessment, which is where a consideration as to whether the application raises significant planning matter having regard to the development plan and any other material considerations, or where the application raises economic, social, or environmental issues of significance to the local area. So that's the applications which would fall within Schedule 2 are effectively almost everything else. Applications for planning permission not listed in Schedule 1, which is what I've just said. Development without compliance with conditions previously attached. Applications for development which has already been carried out, i.e. ones where it's retrospective, could come to committee. Applications for reserved matters where they've been built out in phases, so large-scale applications where they're submitting phased reserved matters applications, they could come to committee. Requests to modify Section 106s where it relates to a Schedule 2 application. Applications for listed building consent or discharge of conditions to listed building consent could come to committee. Obviously, that will be matter for you and I, Chair, to take only those ones which are have significant implications. Similarly, applications for advert consent and tree preservation orders would go to that gateway assessment. And the guidance says there is an overriding presumption that the functions listed in Schedule 2, which I've just read out, will be delegated to officers, subject to that gateway assessment, with at least one of the criteria that I've referred to being met, or the application is, if the application is made on behalf of a local planning authority or a member or officer of the council, again, that could trigger referral to committee as well. And then in relation to you and me, Chairman, or Chair, it says that if we don't agree, it then becomes delegated. So I think might be an arm wrestle or something like that, Chairman, at times. But I'm, that's a bit of a fun comment, Chairman. We will be looking very carefully at these. The other thing it talks about is possibly bringing in a triage of some kind, because otherwise it's putting a huge amount of workload and pressure on you and I, Chair. So we will see what that means in terms of the triage. And then the final thing in terms of this is the size of planning committees. The maximum size of a planning committee should be no more than 13. We're currently 15, so we will be required by 30th of September, if the regulations remain unchanged, to reduce to 13. And then the final thing coming out of the Planning and Infrastructure Act is the potential to set locally set fees. My view and those of our colleagues in other Kent authorities is we will wait and see what comes out of the local government reorganisation announcement, and then we will work with our colleagues within the unitary that we will be in to set agreed fees, possibly between us, or keep our or the fallback will be the national fees. So that's a new legislation reform to Planning Committee. Just going through the performance, you'll see here number of applications received and determined in the year, marginally better than the last year. Percentage of major applications determined against performance, look at that. Incredible performance by Pete and his team, 100% in time. Percentage of minors, again, you can see that there are an amazing performance there, 91.67% there in time. Other applications, which is the householder ones mostly, 97% dealt with in time. Now, these are against a target of 70%, so significantly above target. And this just sets out those achievements by Pete and the team. Planning fees, this is the fees for this year. You'll see we started very well, dropped a little bit. There was some IT problems in there. We didn't get nil in that month. We got more than nil, but there was a decline. But then you'll see a significant increase there. So fees have been very good. What I will warn members is that's partly because we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply. We haven't got an up-to-date local plan adopted as yet. So we are vulnerable to speculative applications, and they are coming in, as members know. Planning applications determined with a statutory time frame compared with other local planning authorities. You can see we are well above, or Pete's team, well above the national average there. Similarly there. How do we compare to other local planning authorities? This is a percentage of decisions granted, so that should be high. There is a presumption in favour of development, 92%, probably around about right. Percentage determined within extension of time, that should be low because we want ideally applications determined in the normal time without using extension time. So 20%, you can see we perform very well compared to other local authorities. Major developments percentage decided within 13 weeks. The difficulty we have there is that most of the major we get a lot of significant applications. With those significant applications come Section 106 agreements. So although Pete's team will resolve to approve it within 13 weeks or determine it within 13 weeks, it does then have, most of them do have Section 106 agreements, which will take it over that time period, hence that 33% period there. But again, we're performing well compared to other authorities. And then non-major development decided within 8 weeks. Again, we're looking at a good performance there, is a high percentage, 80%. You can see how well we compare to our colleagues in other authorities. Householder applications, you already know we're well in the 90s on those, which is fantastic performance. Appeals, members, you'll know from the other reports that we're still receiving appeals. We're doing pretty well in terms of decisions. So you'll see here appeals allowed in the quarter here and appeals dismissed. So we're performing well. And that meets my target there is no more than 30% of appeals being allowed. That's my target, our target. It's not a national target, but I feel that anything more than 30% starts to indicate that we're making decisions which are not in accordance with national policy. And Pete and I review all appeal decisions where they've been allowed or go contrary to officers' recommendation. Prior approvals, number of units under construction. It seems quite good, 1,382 under construction. but members, you know that our housing target is over 1,600 dwellings. So we are not, we're still well short. And then in terms of the units completed, we had some good years. 2021, 21, 22, started to drop a little bit in 22, 23, picked up to our best year ever in 23, 24, but then dropped significantly in 24, 25 due to some economic reasons there, which still seem to be continuing. But still, in terms of comparison with other local authorities, we're doing well and incredibly busy. Again, Pete's in charge of the enforcement team. You can see from the yellow here, the team have been not only dealing with existing cases, but serving planning contravention notices, serving breach of condition notices, and serving some enforcement notices as well. But you can see there are a significant number of cases and activities that we're still going through. And Alison, Stevie, who's a new officer, and Hannah are working incredibly hard to reduce those outstanding complaints and resolve those. TPO applications, I've now got up to staff with those. So we've got Mike, we've got Keith, and we've got Richard now working on these, as well as a consultant who will keep for another couple of months, just so that we can keep on top of those. Because members will also see from the report that with the new staff and freeing up Mike's time, we have served 1 new tree preservation order in the quarter, and 8 new tree preservation orders are under consideration. And in addition, members will be aware of the 4 Elms tree planting project, which was incredibly successful, and is a real credit to Mike and the team there. Lead Local Flood Authority, members know how great Gabby is on that, and you can see just what a performance that is. So she's 100%. And in terms of complaints and compliments, we do very, very well. We work in a process where people aren't happy. Either we approve something that they're objecting to, or we refuse something where they're applicants. So there are always people unhappy. But again, my team work incredibly hard in terms of customer service to ensure that whatever the decision, the customer feels that they've had a good level of service and a good level of engagement with my team. Hence, the number of complaints that are upheld are minimal. And only 1 was upheld in the quarter by me, which was just a slight delay in arranging pre-application advice. And then on page 1 or 2, you'll see the compliments that the team has been receiving. So, Chairman, I think it's a really good report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to all your team for all the hard work that they put in. Any member? Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, great report, Dave, and compliments to all the staff. My question, though, is more about the other authorities, and I always look to Swale on some of their percentages on getting decisions made within certain times, and often in the low 20% mark. And it's only just a general question, because you do so well here in Medway. I just wondered if you know what the reasons might be for Swale. Is it just can't get the staff, or is it something else about Swale?
This is a public meeting. It's something. I mean, I've got the greatest respect to my the chief planning officer. Well, she's not chief planning officer; she's assistant director in Swale, and they do have some good staff. They have had difficulties in recruiting, though, and they are reliant on consultants who are never as they're good, but they're never as I'm trying to think of the right words to phrase this. I'm going to say dedicated. That's a wrong word, but they're not necessarily as committed to the local area as permanent staff. My staff are all permanent staff, and they're absolutely 100% committed to Medway. And when I've used consultants in the past for determining planning applications, they're not as I'm trying to think of the right word, but they're not as attuned to the local area as my staff is. So that could be part of the reason. There may be other reasons. Now, in terms of linking to local government reorganisation, if that's where you were moving towards, Councillor Gilbourne. I've started working with potential partner authorities, one of which is Swale, to look at their processes, our procedures, and to see where we can make sure that if local government goes ahead, the new unitary authority on day one has a good planning process as Medway Council has.
Thank you. Councillor Golvin.
Yes, I can't resist coming back on the new legislation, but just for a second talk about the rest of the report. Yes, it's very good, and I think our officers, Dave and his team, have got to be congratulated. But it does worry me that this government is ramming down our throats an undemocratic system. This committee, over the years I've been on it, has spent hours, as we've done it tonight, trying to do the best for Medway. And it looks like the members are going to be pushed out largely. What really concerns me, particularly with the Schedule 1 applications, there's got to be some methodology of having an input from ward councillors into that somehow to act on behalf of their residents. A lot of our residents see the council as a huge, great bureaucracy. They can't cope with often quite simple things because it is a difficult thing to navigate through. And every single one of us in this room knows that we have to act on behalf of our residents when they don't feel capable of doing it themselves. To me, that is a major part of a member's job. And I think that applies to planning as well. There's, people will not often be able to articulate it as well as perhaps they should be able to, their concerns. And I think what will happen is we will have a lot of small-scale developments that will be extremely detrimental to people in the local area. And I think there's got to be some way of putting the ward councillors' thoughts, into that. And the same goes for the committee. I mean, we've seen it tonight. The ward councillors spoke very eloquently. There's got to be that. Even if the decision is ultimately going to be delegated to officers, I feel there's got to be some mechanism that we should find to try and help our residents' views to be heard. Unless that is going to be totally stopped by legislation, I hope not. But I'd like to. Perhaps this is not the time for it, but I think we need probably some more detailed discussion out of formal committee to learn what we can and cannot do. Because certainly I would like to see here in Medway and then in the new unitary authority, which I will not be part of, a mechanism where residents' views can be fed in via their elected members, because that's what we're here for. I mean, some of this is good. I mean, yes, locally set fees, we should have had that a long time ago. Spatial development strategies will, simplify things. It's not all bad, but I feel that local government is being penalised because of the act. A few local authorities that haven't done as well as they should have done. But at the end of the day, we are also relying on developers to bring their schemes forward. And if they don't want to bring their schemes forward, no matter what we do as a committee or a council, they are not going to bring them forward. And unfortunately, the government has committed itself to this 1.5 million homes to be built in the lifetime of this parliament, which everybody knows is not going to happen. But if they're going to try and run a roughshod over democratic representation just to try and get a few 100,000 perhaps more than they would have done under our present system, I think it's a pretty poor show. Thank you.
Thank you. So do you want to come in, Dave?
Chair, thank you very much. And Councillor Govan and I have had a number of conversations on this, and I understand and respect his views very much. So obviously, I'm only just reflecting what's coming out in draft regulations. Just to come back on a few things there. In terms of Schedule 1 stuff, if the regulations remain unchanged, in terms of Schedule 1, they will be automatically delegated, so there will be no ability to call them into committee. I do respect what you've said. In terms of the Schedule 2, the call into committee will be based on what I've said earlier. The number of representations, it's been very clear in the guidance, will not be a reason to trigger something to committee. So you could have 100 representations, that will not be a trigger to committee. It's whether it raises issues in the gateway, and that will be a matter for myself and the chair to look through. But we'll have to go through it very carefully on that. In terms of ward councillors' involvement, it's a really good point that you make, Councillor Govan, as always. I think what I would say, my initial reaction to that is always welcome discussions between the ward councillors and the case officer on things, so that there can be that discussion over the issues. Always welcome that. I think planning presentations from developers to members, so again, members can feel that they have an input into those applications, and myself and the chair can gauge the feel in the room as well, and consider the responses in terms of those gateway aspects. And then I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Govan, in terms of why the previous government started to introduce this and why this government has continued it. It's because there have been a number of authorities across the country where the planning committees have made political decisions rather than planning decisions, which has resulted in a lot of appeals and a lot of costs awards against those councils, and those costs come out of the public purse as well as the costs of those appeals. So I think you're absolutely right, Adrian. This planning committee has always worked really, really well, and you make decisions based on planning considerations. And we've seen one tonight where you overturned the officer's recommendation, but you did so, we pushed you a little bit, but you did so on planning grounds. But not all authorities have behave in the same way. And I think Councillor Gilbourne might have touched on one a little while ago.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond-Eshay.
Thank you very much for your report. It's always welcomed and shows good progress. I want to support my colleague Galvin in terms of the councillor representation at committees. I think it's important. It's one opportunity where the general public can see their local councillors fighting for them. It's the one that I think is probably the only committee where the general public can actually see the people they elected going toe-to-toe fighting for what matters to them. So I do recognise that they have the local knowledge, they have lived experience. So I welcome more of that. My question is around the number 13 and the rationale behind 13. Not that I'm a suspicious man, but it's not a nice number, particularly around building and regulations. We have buildings that don't go up to floor 13. We're talking about flats and high rises. They avoid the number for a particular reason. So why are we reducing the number? And is that potentially putting more power to the 13 from 15 to 13? When I thought that either you expand it out a bit more, in fact, so that you can have a more robust conversation. And when you do reach your decision, it's based upon more people coming to that conclusion, not a fewer number.
Chair, can I firstly say it's not me making these recommendations. This is what's coming from government. What I would say is that the original consultation was recommending a much smaller number, so between 8 and 11, I think it was. Between, I thought that was my alarm clock for a while there. Yeah, between 8 and 11, we, along with other authorities, said that was too small. It needed to be greater than that. And privately at training sessions or with the Planning Advisory Service, I talked about how well this committee works and how well it works with 15. I suppose you could say I was listened to and others were listened to a little bit because they've increased it from 8 to 11 up to 13, but that's what's coming out in the draft regulations.
Thank you, Dave. Any other member? No. Oh, Councillor Peake.
I certainly don't want to lose the wisdom and experience of so many people on the planning committee. Following through the spirit of devolution, the idea of bringing democracy closer to hand, I'm very much in tune with the concerns about, as my two colleagues have said, with the new regulations, it's not clear to me what the difference is. So I've never had calls, I'm gabbling here, I've never had calls yet in my area to look at an application form and to represent, I've never been called upon to do that. How does that work, by the way? If in the future you've got a list which will automatically defer because of the category they come into, how will it work then for members to be able to see that? And would they be able to flag up with, obviously within the time structure, and say, actually on this one, please don't defer it, can we call it to committee?
Chair, that's a really good question. I think we talked earlier today about training for members on HMOs. I think Councillor the leader of the council has asked me to do some training on spatial development strategies. But Councillor Peake, you've raised a good thing. In terms of the regulations when they come out and the guidance when it comes out, what I will do is I will arrange for training for all members, and myself and the legal officer will go through the regulations and the draft guidance and answer questions as best we can.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
I just wanted to say that in general terms, as colleagues know, I've very often asked at this committee whether we're meeting our 90% target on delegation to officers, and in general terms, I'm quite a fan of that. Successive governments have asked us to ensure that 90% planning decisions are delegated to officers, and the reason for that presumably is that it just doesn't make sense for members to be chewing over issues like front porches and what have you. We need to be concentrating on the really important issues. So in terms of what the Chief Planning Officer reported about greater delegation, I'm more relaxed about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? No? Okay. Is the report noted by members? Yep, thank you. So now moving on to agenda item 10, appeal decisions. Dave Harris, Chief Planning Officer, will be presenting this report. So over to you, Dave.
Chair, thank you very much. Members know what we report on is appeals which have been allowed or appeals where members made a different decision from the one recommended by officers. So, for instance, the Upner application tonight, you refused the application contrary to our recommendation. If that goes to appeal, we'll be reporting that decision back here. So on these ones here, the first one related to a garage conversion, part 2-storey and single-storey extensions to granny annex and garden room. So this is the existing property here. Here's the garage, and the proposal was to convert that. So that's the garage. So it's to convert that and extend it to as an annex, as you can see here. And the inspector considered whether the issues to be whether it would create a new independent residential dwelling, and whether it would be an unacceptable impact in terms of character and appearance in the countryside. So this is what was proposed. So this is existing, and this is proposed here. The inspector took the view that the independent annex, although it would have all the facilities, independent facilities, it would be served by the same access as the main house. Didn't show the garden being separated off, and therefore he was. She was. She or he were accepting the proposal in terms of its independence. Said that, well, if it's changed, if it becomes an independent, it would require planning permission, and the council can enforce that should they wish to in the future. And then said, well, in terms of the character and appearance, well, it's pretty small scale in terms of those extensions. Its impact on the character of the area is minimal, and therefore it's acceptable. My worry here is the inspector didn't impose a condition that we would normally impose, that this should remain as an annex and not be let or sold as a separate residence. So it puts a lot of enforcement pressure on my team. So we'll see in the future. So I'm disappointed that they didn't impose that condition, but can understand the reasons. Second appeal relates to the property out here, so out in the sticks. So you've got a big house here and a pair of semi-detached properties just in there. So that's them here. So this half has already got an extension to the side. This one here, they were proposing to extend quite significantly through there, with what you can see here in terms of those extensions. We took the view that the extensions were too large out in the rural area and would harm the character of the area. The inspector agreed with that, but interestingly said that because of the personal needs of the applicant in terms of accessibility, he attached greater weight to those accessibility issues than the harm to the area. That's an unusual decision because personal circumstances are sadly temporary, but the physical extensions are more permanent. So it's unusual for an inspector to have made such a decision. We have taken legal advice though, and the view is that we wouldn't be successful in challenging the decision. The inspector did consider all the material planning considerations and came to an argued decision. And then the final one relates to enforcement notice relating to a rear extension, this rear extension that you see here. We consider this rear extension to be harmful to the character of the area and harmful to the existing property, and we stand by that decision. So we served an enforcement notice. There were also a number of representations made by local residents in relation to the appeal. The inspector, in his decision, looked only at the local authorities' reasons for serving the enforcement notice, and that was in terms of the character of the area and in terms of the character of the existing property. And the inspector, as you'll see from the report, found that, well, there are other flat roof dormers in the large flat roof dormers in the area. It's to the rear, so it's acceptable. Unusually, the inspector didn't consider the other concerns raised by members of the public, other planning concerns raised by members of the public. And normally an inspection appeal decision will say, these are the issues raised by the local planning authority, these are my views on them, and then finish by saying, well, these are other issues that have been raised by local residents and these are my views in them. The inspector didn't do that in this instance. Again, we've taken legal advice on that as to whether that meant the decision is challengeable. The legal advice correctly is that the inspector did consider all the planning issues that we had raised in serving the enforcement notice, so there was no justifiable reason for us to challenge the appeal decision. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Any members No, is the report noted? Oh, sorry, councillor Galvin.
Madam Chair, is there any update on the land at Factory Farm, Walden, Dave, please?
Is that on the enforcement?
It's on the appeals in the agenda.
On the appeals?
Or if you haven't got it to hand, Dave, perhaps...
I'll come back to you on
another
that,
time.
Factory Farm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay, any other member? No, is the report noted? Yeah. Thank you. And then we go on to agenda item 11, section 106 agreement. So over to Dave Harris.
Chairman, the report said just to note that, so this is three aspects to this. Money's received in the quarter, section 106 is signed, and Burswide's contributions received. I'm happy to take any questions or comments, and I will, if I can't answer them today, I will come back to members.
Okay, any members? No, is the report agreed and noted? Okay, so then agenda item 12, exclusion of the press and public. Is it agreed that the press and public are excluded from agenda item 13 and 14, the last two items on the agenda? Thank you. So now we'll stop the recording and just wait for the gallery to clear.